Brittany Braswell is a registered dietitian, food freedom, and body image coach. She's a public speaker and the host of Faith Filled Food Freedom. She has a passion for helping Christian women break free from the soul crushing life of food guilt and body shame. And she believes that Christ centered coaching leads to lasting transformation. Sis, I cannot wait to share with you on today's episode. Brittany, she's on a mission, whether she's speaking on live or virtual stages, to bring a message of hope and healing and equipping women, just like all of my listeners here, to ditch diet culture. When she's not cheering on her clients, you'll find Brittany savoring small town life in Alabama with her husband and their 3 energetic kiddos. This episode is a treat. Let's get right to it. Hey girl, welcome to the Her Best Self podcast. I'm Lindsey, former competitive figure skater and perfectionist, turned God-led imperfect boy mom and digital CEO. If you find yourself constantly thinking about food and wondering if you'll wake up one day free from the obsessive thoughts and behaviors controlling your life, then I've created this podcast for you. Because I know exactly what it's like to be a downright hot mess, trapped in a destructive cycle of disordered eating. I finally found freedom, and you can too, girlfriend. So if you're ready to heal your relationship with food and body and break the chains of control and show up in your best health, then grab your favorite Tarjay journal and let's get to it. So you can start living your best life as your best self. All right, Brittany, I am so excited to introduce you to my amazing group of women that are listening to the show today and to have you on the show finally. I feel like it has been way overdue. So welcome to the podcast. You're actually my first dietitian guest, which feels super special. And I just want you to be able to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what led you to specialize in helping women with food freedom.
Oh, well, Lindsay, I'm so honored to be here, but also to be the first dietitian, which is so fun. Yeah, so I think I've been in this field for 12, 13 years, I think at this point. And I think what really led me here, my story is a little different than a lot of eating disorder dietitians in the sense that I didn't really grow up where, I struggled a ton in my home. I had parents who had a pretty healthy relationship with food. I saw diet cycle in and out, but there was never, thankfully, my parents never like shamed me or forced me into doing that with them. But when I got in college, I switched my major to nutrition after going in like pre-med, pre-dental, something in that area. And as phenomenal as the education was when it came to nutrition, the way it was communicated and taught and how we were taught to teach, it was a lot of eat this, not that, a lot of good food, bad food sort of talk I really started noticing not just how it was impacting how I was thinking and talking about food, but how it was impacting the patients and the clients that I was working with. I was like, this is not it. Like, this is not helpful. And so it put me on this long journey through the rest of college, grad school, internship, anything I could get my hands in after that, that I was like, I want to actually help people. I want to make sure I'm not seeing food in such a polarizing black and white way because it's impacting my relationship with food and I don't want it to negatively impact anyone else's. So the Reader's Digest version is it became this very intentional education and experiential process for me to make sure I was having a healthy relationship with food by being able to still teach and encourage and help women in, the ones that are wanting to eat in a way that nourishes their body, but without the restriction and the guilt and the mindset of, "Oh, I have to eat this, one right, best, only perfect." Thankfully, I got a chance to, in grad school, really dive into the world of disordered eating. And I went, oh yeah, hey, I've struggled with that piece, or I've struggled with this piece, or oh my goodness. And so it was this big light bulb moment of me recognizing some of those areas of struggle. And then from that point on, going, okay, I have a big passion for this. Let me help other women in this area. I love talking to other dietitians to go, let me save you and all of your clients some struggle, right? Let me try to equip you so that you can not pass that kind of relationship onto your clients. So it's been such a fun journey. And I feel like I have grown so much along the way. And I'm excited to hopefully give your listeners today some encouragement in that same area.
Yeah, I definitely think that everyone's in for a treat because just your combination of your expertise as a dietitian and then also the body image coaching that you do as well. It's right up the alley of, all of my clients and the ladies that I support. And we struggle with the bad body image thoughts and those feelings and all of it that is tied to eating disorders. And then what I love about you and how we connected, I feel was just our faith around this because
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
don't have a strong foundation, I say this time after time again, like whatever it is that you believe in, but for me, it's Jesus Christ. But like if you don't have a strong foundation of something greater than you, it's really hard to recover outside of yourself. And so I just want to get your
100%.
perspective on like how did you discover this powerful combination and how you work with clients, right, who are struggling so much with their meal planning or menu and food and body image, and then also bringing in this Christ perspective. Like, what is that combination and why do you feel like it works so well?
Well, I think number one, it works so well because our bodies were created by the Lord. So he knows them better than we do.
Amen.
And and so it was I used to work in the trenches in a PHP residential eating disorder treatment center. I was there for several years serving the ladies day in and day out there. And it was not a Christian treatment center, but I was very open about my faith so that anyone who had a relationship with the Lord or wanted to know more about it knew that I was a safe person to talk to about that. And so a lot of them really wanted, like, their faith was really important to them as well. And they wanted to talk about how does my relationship with the Lord or my faith beliefs, how are those impacting my relationship with food? And especially so much of it, you know this, Lindsey, but if you're listening and you don't realize this, so much of your belief system has a drastic impact on how you perceive your own identity, your worth, and your value. And so it was so much fun for me to be able to take this evidence-based approach to recovery and talk about how is the Lord and how's your faith literally woven into every part of the process. And what I started noticing with that is the ones who wanted to talk about it and were interested in having this sort of integrated conversation is that they made so much more progress so much more quickly and sustained it, because they had, like you said, they had that solid foundation to work from rather than feeling like, okay, I'm doing this on my own, which means I'm carrying the weight of all of this, no pun intended, right? Because we have all of these fears when it comes to our bodies, which means that when you're carrying all of it, it's all up to you. And so there's this tremendous pressure to that A student, right? That so many of us, when we're type A, that tends to lead a lot of times when you struggle a lot with restriction or perfectionism. You've got to check the box on everything. Everything's got to be in order. And you end up feeling this pressure to even do recovery like an A student, right? As an A student, I'm really good at my eating disorder, but now I want to really be good at recovery. And you just end up with a lot of pressure, which can often lead into relapse behaviors and other types of struggles. So, by integrating the faith, short answer here, it really just gives you that strong foundation to build off of so that you're not relying on your own strength to get through the process and you have truth to fall back on again and again and again when the eating disorder tries to convince you that you're wrong.
100%. I feel like if we ended the show right now, that would be enough because women need to hear that. They need to hear that there are going to be days where you don't want to get out of bed. There are going to be days where, if you're in recovery, there's ups and downs and all arounds. I call it the messy middle. And it's just finding strength in something greater than you. And for me, it was really surrendering my ideal of the body, like what my body needed to look like, and go, you know what? Like, God, you made me this way. And I'm going to learn how to embrace that, even if it is the hardest thing that I ever have to do. And
Yeah.
I just love your perspective on this. So I want to take us down a different path and start to really connect our listeners today with like menu planning, meal planning. And so I have a fun question for you that I prepped just because I have a fun experience in my own past with meal plans.
Yeah.
And a lot of my ladies ask me all the time, like, what are your thoughts on meal plans? Do you think that, we can incorporate one as we partner with you, Lindsey, and work together on partnering around like what I should eat and when I should eat it? And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on what are your thoughts on meal plans? Do they serve a purpose? Do you think they're for everyone? And just get some expertise around the whole view of meal planning. Because I feel like, when we're in clinical settings, right, it's almost like a prescriptive type thing. And I think that this
Right.
will give a lot of juice for our listeners today. So would love your perspective.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to try to keep this short because this could be a whole episode in its entirety. So I like to use two separate terms for this. When I use the term meal planning, I think of that typically as what you're going to get in the treatment center setting, where it's the structure of what you're having or the amount, or hey, we're having these food groups at this time of day and these at this time, and this is how you build your plate. And that kind of asks, or that sort of structure is really helpful for a long time. You can think of a meal plan as like a cast, right? Like
Right.
you break a bone, you put a cast on your arm, and it helps to stabilize it, right? And you need that stability while you're healing. However, if you leave that cast on for too long, your muscles start breaking down, right? The term we use is atrophy. Your arm starts losing a lot of strength because it doesn't need stability like that forever. So I think that kind of meal plan deserves its place, its time. If you're listening right now, that may be the stage that you're in, is you need something more structured to really give you the support and the nutritional rehab and the accountability as you progress. But eventually the cast has got to come off. And at that point, I think it can be helpful sometimes to have a very flexible meal plan so that generally, hey, if I want to nourish my body, I want to incorporate fun foods, play foods. I think there's a place for that. But for the most part, I like to switch to the phrase I use is menu planning, where it's less structure and it's more, hey, here's what we're just going to eat this week. This may not be the same as a lot of dietitians, but I sometimes hate menu planning because it used to feel like such a chore. And there are weeks where it still does, where I want to prioritize everything else. So I have backup plans when that happens. Um, but I like to keep it simple because the objection I hear to menu planning so often, and Lindsey, you may hear this, or maybe you've thought this, is like, well, Brittany, if I menu plan, then how am I supposed to be intuitive with that? How do I practice intuitive
Hmm.
eating and eating what sounds good? And my response to that is you don't necessarily have to decide what you're going to eat on each specific day of the week. But if you don't have some sort of plan for at least knowing, hey, what do I have on hand? What can I make? Then you come to mealtime and you're like, what in the world do I eat? Or you go, hey, what actually does really sound good tonight is lasagna. But then you go in your freezer and you go, oh, it's going to take like 2 hours because it's frozen solid. So I can't really be intuitive now because it's not available. So I think by looking ahead a little bit and having an idea, at least of what ingredients do I have on hand, what are some meals that I really enjoy, I have come up with a process for sort of menu planning that allows me to be extra super flexible. And I got some of this from a recent mentor of mine as well to simplify the actual menu planning process. So I use a system in my house. We may be jumping ahead on this, so redirect me if you want to, Lindsey. But one of my favorite things that I use to actually menu plan to keep from the decision fatigue, because that, as a mom, at least, I'm in a season of life where I have three littles. I have a second grader, a kindergartner, and like a 19-month-old. So I don't just have a ton of time to sit and make a homemade gourmet meal every night. So most of what I prep, I need to not be coming to the kitchen all the time going, what do I have tonight? So I've just made decisions all day. Who knows, hundreds or thousands of decisions. I
Yeah.
don't always want to come. Like sometimes I just want to go, what sounds good? And be able to make something. And other times I want to go, I don't really want to think about it right now. I'm so exhausted. Let me just pick what's on the board, like what I know I have. So I have a menu board that is, I think it was like a $5 board that I got, like just a frame almost that I got from Hobby Lobby like a year ago, and took some little teeny they kind of look like clothespins, but they're metal, and I hot glued them on it. And I have little like index cards. I think they're recipe cards that I was given a while back. And I just write down not an item, but like the full meal. So like on one day earlier this week, I had like a one pot chicken enchilada casserole type thing, right? That I could just throw it all on a stove. And I literally will clip it. I know it goes, I have 7. So it goes Sunday to Saturday. And I go, okay, we always do breakfast for dinner on Sunday. So that one's good to go. And then clip this on whatever other day that I know I have at least 20 or 30 minutes to prep. And then if we get to that day and the kid has had a meltdown or I'm exhausted and I just don't want to get in front of the stove, then I can go, okay, remove it from the clip, slide it down to a different night, and I'm going to go with a backup of some stuff that I know I have in stock. So that's kind of been my flexible way of, over big overview here. We could get in the nitty gritty, but that is the general way that I like to approach menu planning is go, let me plan for, 3 or 4 meals that I know I have the ingredients for, or that I can quickly go to the store and, only get a handful of ingredients and then make it flexible and know that we're going to have leftovers some other nights. And if all else fails and we can't do the thing because we're exhausted, I know we've got like stuff that takes 5 minutes that I can pull from the pantry or the fridge, like stock items that I can throw a quick meal together and still feel good about afterwards.
I think you just helped a lot of women here. I personally I call it the menu by design, and it's pretty much exactly what you described outside of being that organized though, because my brain can be a little scattered. I'll have like a DoorDash, or I'll have like we'll be throwing
Yeah.
in like a DoorDash, or we'll be throwing in, okay, what proteins do we have? And the menu by design concept kind of came from this too, where it's, okay, what are 5 different things I can pull from when I'm just not knowing what I want? Or
Yep.
because I do think a lot of times, at least when you're struggling with even granting yourself permission to eat certain things,
Hmm.
been fear foods or are fear foods are super scary. I mean, I talk about that a lot. I had a lot of different foods, carbs in general, but a lot of different foods that were super scary for me to reintroduce when I was trying to, recover. For me, it didn't become super intuitive. In many ways, it's very mechanical. And it's like, okay, so what are some of these things that I have on hand? Exactly what you were talking about for me
Hmm.
to just grab, because that voice in my mind might say whatever it is that she wants to say, but I can combat that with an action like, okay, I've got lasagna things, I've got ingredients for, chicken bake or like whatever those things are. Because I do feel like while it is super important to continue to enter in zones of where can I incorporate new varieties of food, and I'm sure you have so many different thoughts on this too. For me, it's very much like, okay, if I'm only eating these 5 things, like how do I just increase those 5 things? And then also, how do I get away from maybe it's other things that are involved in that menu planning? And something I wanted to ask you around going to the grocery store in itself or reading labels, right? I know we could have tons more, and we'll might have to bring you back on the show to talk more about some of these concepts, but just going into the grocery store to think about menu planning can be very overwhelming when for decades you've only
Yeah.
allowed yourself certain things. So, do you have any thoughts on if she's standing in front of the fridge and it is a time she's not normally eating, she probably has restricted it prior, right? I'm sure we've got some listeners that are in that spot today, but she's like, I want to do better. I want to start eating more. I want to eat more frequent. I'm scared, but I want to do better. What is just a real tactical, tangible idea that you have that could kind of support her for a practical step?
Yeah, I'm gonna play a little bit off of what I mentioned before in that in those moments when you're trying to make that decision, the eating disorder voice, the enemy's gonna come in and say, hey, this is too hard. Like, just don't eat anything, right? Or just grab something and that's right there that you see and be done. And so the more thought it takes, the more work it takes, the harder it's gonna be to push through. So I always tell my clients, like, let's plan ahead to make sure that we, I have like call it like my par stock list. Like I did a brain dump one day of this is like a nerdy food management nutrition service kind of term, but what are the things that we need to keep on hand all the time so that you can throw something together without hardly having to think about it when I'm in one of those moments of need to eat something. Nothing really sounds good, but I know I need to nourish my body and I don't want it to be mentally or physically exhausting. So when we have 2 or 3 different meals that can throw together in literally 5 minutes or less. One of them, I'll just give you a quick example. We love Mexican food, and I always, without fail, have black beans and rice pouches and salsa on hand. So,
Love
and
it.
shredded cheese. So, like, I can take, and I love black beans especially. That's like one of my favorites. So I can take a can of black beans, toss them, in a colander, drain them, rinse them, toss them in a bowl in the microwave, add a little bit of salsa to give them some flavor. I don't even do anything else. Like I just let the salsa be the seasoning. If I have taco seasoning around, sometimes I'll sprinkle some of that in. And then I have these microwavable rice pouches that they're actually my husband has a couple of food allergies, so we have to find some that don't have allergens in them. And there's this one kind that bonus that's made with bone broth, so you get a little extra protein boost there, especially since this is a meal that doesn't have meat. I use the beans as the protein, unless I happen to have. I do try to keep some shredded chicken in the freezer, like in
Mhm.
little baggies. That is one of my favorite quick hacks for like when you need a meal and you don't want to cook. I will, whenever I grocery shop, I will typically throw a couple of chicken breasts just with some salt and pepper in a crock pot. Then when it's done, shred it, let it cool a little bit, and go ahead and like take a handful or two and put them in Ziploc baggies, pop them in the freezer so that when I need shredded chicken quickly, I'm not trying to cook it. I don't have to thought, can literally take the baggie, dump it out in a bowl and pop it in the microwave and let it thaw for like 60 seconds. So that's an extra if you want to make sure you've got some meat in there. But yeah, the black beans, throw the rice in, a little salsa, a handful of, whatever kind of shredded cheese I have on hand. And if we happen to have, some guacamole or something, I'll toss that in there. Or avocados. Like avocados are one of those things that they're like they're not quite ripe enough forever, and then they ripen perfectly, and then the next day they're like really soft. So
I
we have a
know.
hard time. We have a hard time like picking. I had a conversation about a client with this yesterday, which is why it's on my mind about like how do we include avocados the perfect, texture or whatever ripeness. So that's one of our quick things. It takes me 10 seconds to fish the rice and the beans out of my pantry. Can tear the little slit in the rice, pop it in the microwave. While that's going, I drain and rinse the beans, pull the rice out, pop the beans and salsa in. It goes for a minute, and within 3 to 5 minutes, like got my meal. Who all's eating it? If it's just me or if it's anybody else, it's a quick lunch. It's a quick, no hassle dinner prep. I literally have no dishes to do except for the bowl that I use that I can just pop in the dishwasher. So I think having some strategies like that, having 2 or 3 moderately nutritionally balanced meals can be really helpful so that you get to the end of the meal and you hopefully it's something that you can enjoy, right? That you can choose a flavor profile or a spice or a sauce or something that has a flavor you're looking forward to, even when nothing really sounds good. And then, quick prep, you don't really have to think about it. And it doesn't give that eating disorder voice time to go, no, it's too much work. Just skip it today. We'll try again tomorrow.
I love this. This is what I do. Actually, I'm gonna have to try your recipe with the Mexican because I love Mexican. I definitely have go-to. We try to do like proteins every Sunday, and my husband is the cook in our household. I've just never been a foodie, and I think probably after having an eating disorder, a lot of people are just not, right? You're not gonna just become like a chef overnight and just love food to the end of,
Yeah.
time, but I think that for us it works where we have like a something always there so that that excuse doesn't come in of like, okay, we have nothing to eat. Well, for me now it's just I DoorDash when I have nothing to eat. But
Yeah.
that's taken years to it's probably not the best strategy, but hey, I know, after years and years of recovering, like I know that this is non-negotiable. And so
Mhm.
kind of going into that mindset shift, would love your thoughts before we finish today on say that she has not, the listener that's listening today, like doesn't have carbs in her diet, right? Like how do we start incorporating things that might be net new and can often be super scary? Because if you have, just with your example, my immediate thought was, if I have a restrictive, disordered relationship with food, the first thing I'm cutting out is that rice. And that's not to be triggering for the ladies listening, but that's just how I would have looked at that in the past. So it's like, how do we go? I'm going to grant myself permission to do this and start small, maybe. Do you have any thoughts on incorporating maybe smaller portions, or how do we get around like some of those fear foods that seem a little bit harder when you're first trying to incorporate new foods into your diet.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different strategies. So, depending on your approach and what's helpful for you, I think this can absolutely vary. So, I think it's really helpful, number one, to have some education about whatever that nutrient or food group is that's scaring you, making sure that you have a way to recognize, is there something I'm believing about this that is a lie or that's untrue? And that's going to take somebody outside of yourself to do that, because you will have convinced yourself that, you know, carbs are the devil, right? That we can't do that and I don't need them. And so being able to have, somebody like you, Lindsey, or have a team that you can work with to really help you challenge those thoughts and those fears that are oftentimes based on a lie, I think is absolutely crucial. So often, too, and so many of your listeners may fall into this category of, I've memorized the nutrition labels. I know what's in it, and I can't just not think about that. And so I think a huge thing, anytime you're trying something new or maybe something you haven't had in a while, accountability is like the gold standard, right? If you can have the meal, even if you're not telling the person that's sitting with you, like, hey, will you please make sure I take a bite of this? Obviously that would be so helpful. But even just saying, okay, we're going to go out to eat and we're going to go to this particular restaurant. And as long as I know that there's somebody sitting next to me that's also going to be eating, like maybe that gives you some effort and some accountability. So you kind of have to know your own points of vulnerability with that and how much another person might need to know. But let's say you are sitting on your own, right? Maybe you are in PHP and you're doing a solo dinner challenge, or you're home and maybe you don't have roommates or husband or whoever there with you, or your mom and you're like, you finally have a night to yourself. So you're going to go out to eat, or husband
Yeah.
has taken everybody out and you get the house to yourself. When you were incorporating something new, something I try to remind my clients of is everything is going to feel scary first. That's almost always going to be the case. There may be some foods that feel a little less scary and some that feel more, but if you can make a like brain dump a list of, here's all the foods that make me really nervous or that I'm afraid to consume, and then dump them into three different categories. Go, left to right. Here's a grouping of the ones that feel least scary. These are moderately scary, and then these, like, I'm terrified of. Start with the ones that are the least scary and give yourself, again, you kind of have to, I think it's most effective to prep for this a little bit ahead of time and going, I know when you use the example of carbohydrates, right? For a lot of clients that I work with, the word carb has gotten such a negative connotation. So I'll tell them, use the entire word carbohydrate, or drop it all together and say a grain or starch. Or I worked with a client one time in the treatment center setting, and I don't remember if it was carbohydrates or fats. She was like terrified of one or the other. So I said, okay, what is something non-food or nutrition related that you feel totally neutral about, that you have no emotional connection with? If you thought for a minute, she goes, cactuses. So, okay, we're going to refer to carbohydrates as cactuses, right? So she'd say, okay, I need a cactus on my plate. I need a this. And she just like giggled about it. She was like, cactus doesn't feel scary. So there's a fun strategy if you need something like that doesn't have that connotation with it that you're concerned about. You probably have no nutritional connection to a cactus. So there you go. Bonus tip.
That is so insightful. I actually just used to, with my dietitian at the time, call them components. And it felt like, okay, I was making the perfectly balanced. And for my
Yeah.
brain, it worked. It was like, okay, I've got this component, and every recipe needs all the components. And so I can't leave that out. And it felt
Yes.
exactly what you were talking about. It was very neutral. It was a way for me to grant that permission. So I think you really just
Yeah.
helped a lot of women grant themselves permission, which is what we love to do on the show. So I feel like we could talk all day, which we have talked before this, and I've enjoyed
Yes,
being on
y'all
your
come
show
listen.
too.
Lindsey has already done an episode on my show too, so we had a great conversation there.
Yeah, and so I loved it. It was so much fun, and just building on that, I know I always ask every guest, which is very far and few in between. I feel like I just am very picky with who I have on, but for a reason, like I want to make sure we're giving all of the best guidance, and so truly appreciate all of your insights. I want to get your thoughts on, what do you feel it means to be your very best self, and any additional light that you want to shine on the women that are listening today.
I love this question because I think it is so subjective and it's so fun to hear. all kinds of different people's answers. So I'd love to hear yours too, Lindsay, on what it is lately. But like for right in this season of life for me, being my best self is when I have total peace about saying no and setting boundaries
Mm.
because I used to be very much more of a people pleaser, I guess, or much more of like a keep the peace, growing up. And I am just not now. I have just learned like I I tend to stir the pot a little bit when not intentionally, but like I'm okay if somebody needs to ask me to do something and I need to say no. Like no can be a one word sentence. It doesn't require constant explanation. You don't have to, oh, I'm so sorry. No, I can't. Oh, I wish I could. There's 100 different ways to say no or no, thank you. But when I personally know what are my values? What is a priority in life right now? And if something comes along, even if it's a great opportunity and it conflicts with one of those, it pulls me further away from my values, it's going to be an easy no. And so that is to be my best self right now means I'm not anxious about my calendar being too full because I've said no to enough most of the time, right? Sometimes I say yes to things that are great things and I go, oh, I'd love to do that. And then I realize after the fact or as we get closer to the event that, okay, maybe I should have left a little more margin in my calendar. So it's not a perfect thing, but that's what it is for me in this season of life and being able to go, hey, I really value serving my clients. I really value spending time with my family. My kids are growing so fast, and there's not a whole lot of wiggle room to say yes to too many things. So I'm pretty particular about that. That's what makes me feel like my best self is when I'm not silly, anxious, and rushing, trying to get too many things done on my calendar.
I think you're speaking the language of all of us listening to this because I definitely know that people pleasing is correlated with disordered eating. It's we are worried about everybody else, right? And then we tend to give us self-care later on in the game. And so I think the fact that you talk about that is what makes you your best self is so important. The reality is that when we are stuck in these patterns and behaviors controlling our life, we can't even think about other things like spending all this time with our family. Our brain is dedicated to all of the nagging thoughts that are living up there. And
Yeah.
so, what you're talking about is living in your truth and speaking your voice. I say that to my 7-year old all the time. I'm like, use your voice, like, use your voice. And it's so helpful and refreshing to hear that, standing in your truth, setting those boundaries, saying no is super important. And I also think that that goes for ladies who might be in recovery right now, like standing in your truth and saying, no, that's triggering to me, or no, that's not helpful to me, or no, I don't want to have a talk about a diet conversation, or no, I need to make sure I'm home for dinner because right now this feels like a safe place for me to nourish my body. All of these things are super helpful. So I just want to say thank you so much. Where can listeners connect with you and learn more about the faith-filled food freedom approach and all of your goodies out on your podcast? Would love to drop everything in the show notes.
Yeah, well, you just mentioned my favorite place to hang out. Right now, we're twice a week on Faith Filled Food Freedom. That is my show. I love it. I love to serve there. We try to share all kinds of fun events and resources and things. So you can find Faith Filled Food Freedom wherever you listen to podcasts. And Lindsay, I know we've talked about a few different concepts today. I will link up just some resources maybe to help you guys with some really simple menu planning without restriction or guilt kind of strategies. So if you head to brittanybraswellrd.com/her best self, I'll link up a couple of resources or podcast episodes, things that you guys can use.
Thank you so much today. And ladies, go out, check Brittany's show out. She is amazing. And we are so thankful that she joined the Her Best Self pod today. So thanks, Brittany. We will have you back on, I'm sure.
We'd love it.
Until then, everybody have a fantastic weekend and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now. Oh, friend, thank you so much for letting me share what was on my heart today. My hope for this podcast is to help more women find freedom from food and body. If this has empowered or blessed you, let me know. I'd be honored for your rating and review of my show, and I'd love to connect with you in my private Facebook community. You really can move from perfection to purpose. Let's break the chains together. I'll help navigate the way. Until next time, bye for now, girl.